Next up, Magy Seif El-Nasr, whose work on many of these related issues happens in a social context that's become much bigger than Hollywood these days, or on a trajectory to dwarf Hollywood, and that's in the context of games. How do we think about this? And she's going to talk about virtual humans in the context of games. She's going to talk about what do we do with all of the data that's generated at scale? How do we process the emergent phenomena? How do we parse the emergent phenomena from all of this very large scale big data that we're generating in the context of these interactions? So please welcome Magy up to the podium.
The talk I'm going to give actually complements really nicely with Stacy's and David's talk, because we collaborate a lot as well, and I'm going to share some of the work that we've been collaborating on as well. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about games and creating context. So you see in robots as well as virtual humans, but then there's also a context that you bring people in and there is an interaction. So games can actually be a platform for creating that context. So a lot of work recently has actually been looking at using games as a platform to look at research in science, affective science, cognitive science, and a number of others like learning sciences as well as other aspects of science. So the reason, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I'm not going to make the argument that you should actually go on and look at games, but you should. There is, looking at games as an enabling technology is kind of interesting because, as I said, the situation is really important, and the context behind which people interact is also very important. So with a game, you can actually create a situation, and you can even model that situation because you see what things are happening in the game, and you can model these interchanges. This is work that is funded by NSF that's in collaboration with a number of people in the lab as well as in psychology. And there we're looking at different, embedding people in different social interactions. So you have like social interactions with NPCs, non-player characters, navigation and motion and movement. So we can actually look at people making different decisions that are involving navigation and movement within space, or combat, as you probably know with games. So you can embed people in these kind of situations, and you can also model the situations and look at decision making that happens within the situations. There was an article in The Guardian that basically discusses, well, you know, with games, you can put games online and then you can collect a lot of data. We have been working with Electronic Arts, for example, and we had 60 million character data. Not specifically 60 million people, but people can create multiple different characters, and we can look at characters through time and their movement through time and maybe their interactions through time. So the Guardian mentioned Tom Stafford's work on learning and patterns, and how they've worked with a game company where they had 850,000 people playing a game, and then they use that kind of data to look at patterns for learning. So games can actually give you a lot of data. They also can give you very granular data because you have people making decisions across time in different situations, and you can model all of that. So granularity becomes really important. This is just a screenshot that you can't see very well of a map of a game where we can actually look at how much time people spent in different areas, how many characters did they talk with, how much time did they spend with the different characters, how much time did they spend with maps, looking at maps and moving maps. So you can get at a lot of different information. You can track it over time, and you can track changes over time as well, and you can visualize it as well. Oops. So for some reason the video is running here but not here. So we've also run several different work where we're looking at eye tracking data. So you can get some of that data, not specifically with like millions of people or thousands of people, but the number of subjects there would be limited. But you look at eye tracking behavior over time as well with the game, and you can see different decisions that people are making. Now, as I said, I'm not going to argue for the use of game, but I'm actually going to say that there is a number of important considerations when you're using a game for science research like that. And I'm going to basically say 3 things about it. And you've heard a little bit about the technology and design aspect. So there are a number of still open problems, depending on the situations that you want to develop or you want to embed people in, that maybe there are still open technology problems that you need to solve. So there's the technology problem. There's also the interpretation problem. You're embedding a user into a situation that's virtual. So they come with their own mindset of what that situation is. Maybe they've played a lot of FPS, first-person shooter games before, and they expect specific things in that situation, right? So they perceive the world in a specific way, and they want to engage in the world. They have specific expectations about that world. So we've been doing a lot of research in that area, and I'm going to call this area the human-game interaction, and that's kind of like one of the areas. The other areas, of course, if you're building a game to collect all of this data, even if you have 10 people, if you want them to play an hour or 2 of a game, you're collecting a lot of data over time. And so your end value is still big because you're seeing how different people actually make decisions over time. So how do you deal with that data? How do you understand and analyze the decision-making process of all these maybe n number of people at n different time steps, at the same time also keep the individual differences intact? So I'm going to talk through each one of these and give you some examples. So with the technology aspect, I'm going to look at a specific problem, again, going back to the idea of trust. This is a collaboration with David and Derek, who's I think is still in the audience, and Matt Gray from theater here, and postdoc, and also Stacy is an advisory board for this project. The premise for this project is, well, there are recent research that basically shows that older adults might actually make specific bad decisions, financial decisions, because they might be ignoring some nonverbal cues that indicate non-trustworthiness. Can we do that kind of experiment in the lab, or can a virtual environment be used to look at that question? So we decided to say, okay, let's look at building a virtual environment, a situation, and look at the relationship between nonverbal behaviors and trust among different age groups. And there we actually are using Stacy's work and building on top of it. And we wanted to specifically look at the effect of warmth and competence and how they're exposed in the nonverbal communication cues. And what does that implicate in terms of the effect on trust? So we constructed a simple game. We're giving subjects $10 and then telling them you're going to meet four different virtual characters. Each one of them will be different. You can walk out with $20, so you can basically multiply your current $10 that you have, or walk out with nothing, depending on who you want to invest with. So they come in, they basically select the different characters. This is just an early prototype. This is still a work in progress. So they basically will meet all the 4 people, or the 4 non-player characters, and they will interact with them and then make a decision in the end. Stacy's already talked about a lot of the work that has to go into it to basically make these characters believable. So we are adding in a number of things. So these characters are actually going to be controlled by a psychologist behind the scenes, but not all the time, because the psychologist cannot really control and say everything that the character can do at any particular second. So the character will have some kind of intelligence and will be able to be directed whenever it needs to. So it includes a model of temperament and other aspects that will make it modulate its behavior over time. And it also includes like a personality model that will allow it to change its degree of warmth or competence. And that work builds on a number of previous work, Stacy's work, Matthias's work, as well as my work. So we're also using actors in that project. So we're actually asking actors to come in, and we're giving them a script, and we're seeing what kind of nonverbal cues they're actually doing when we're telling them do it in terms of high warmth and low competence, or high warmth and high competence. So this is an example video.
Thanks. All right, so when you're ready.
Okay, well, shall we start? Welcome to Finmore Associates. We serve nearly 7 million investors, and we have more offices than almost any other investment firm in America. We attribute a great deal of our success to our long-term approach to investing. We are a full-service brokerage firm and a private partnership, a structure that we believe gives us the independence to make long-term decisions that are in the best interests of our clients and associates. We have more than 11,000 financial advisors located in more than 10,000 offices around the country. We were started in the 1950s. Our founder, Finnegan Moore, began with two simple questions. What makes a stock become a great stock? What must be in place before I buy? To find the answers, he began studying great stocks of the past, looking for common characteristics. He found 7 factors that occurred repeatedly, year after year, decade after decade. He used that discovery to develop an investing discipline based not on hunches, but on historical fact. Finnegan Moore used their approach to achieve remarkable success in the market. By the time he turned 30, he had purchased a seat on the New York Stock Exchange and had founded Finmore Associates, that now serves over 600 of the world's largest mutual funds and institutional investors. And anyone can use it successfully. Over the last quarter century, countless numbers of our clients have paid off their homes, put their children through college, and built the foundation for a worry-free retirement by following our strategy for growing and protecting their money.
We serve.
They have done this using our
Okay, I can't really
step-by-step
stop this. I'm not sure why.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't have the control of this here. So I'm going to just move the, you don't need to really see the speech. So I'm going to show you the 2 different characters. Oops. Hello.
Okay, well, shall we start? Welcome to Finmore Associates. We serve nearly 7.
So you see the 2 different characters in, unfortunately the speech is actually important because there are specific cues in the speech, but they are saying the same thing. One of them has a high warmth and high competence, and the other one have high warmth and low competence. And they're just using gestures to convey that, as well as there are some cues and inflections and pauses in the speech itself. So, unfortunately, you can't see the sound, but you can tell there is differences in terms of the nonverbal behavior, and this particular one in my left basically uses a lot of not very, so it basically is low competence because it's not really very effective in terms of like using the right beats and the gestures. I'm going to move on quickly because I'm also running out of time. The other aspect, so there are 3 different areas, right? So the other aspect is basically how you interact, how the human and game interaction happens. And we've been doing a lot of different studies and like looking at how people actually play different kinds of games. And one of the study, for example, we had this from 60 million character data where we basically looked at how different people played a game called Dragon Age. And there are many different styles of that game. So some people basically talked with every character and walked and interacted with every object in the space and looked at all the different maps and did meticulously everything. And then there is that extreme other case where basically somebody wants to just achieve the objective, will just figure out, oh, you told me to do X, I'm just going to go straight to where X is, I'm going to finish it. So we've been visualizing different behaviors, and there's 3 different play styles that have emerged, and these are kind of like what's visualized here in terms of like how much time they spend and what kind of things that they have done. They are more achievement-oriented versus social-oriented and so forth. The other research project that we did, we basically took some people who played games, first-person shooter games, maybe other kinds of games like role-playing games, and we put them in a context where this is a new kind of interactive narrative called Facade that was developed by Michael Matthias and Andrew Stern. And this is not a very, this is a different kind of interactive environment. It's not really a game where you actually have to achieve specific quests. You are interacting with 2 characters that basically their relationship is falling apart. and they try and corner you in different places. So this is not what a gamer would expect. So we wanted to figure out, what do people do when they go into that interaction like that? And we found a number of things. So they expected, of course, clear rules, like what am I supposed to say to these characters? They expected a reward system, like I want to get something every minute of that interaction. They want a feedback of how well they are doing. And they also expressed that this is kind of a drama rather than a positive interaction. So they wanted to see something positive in the end. They didn't want to have it end very negatively. That was kind of an interesting study. And then we did some eye tracking study as well to look at how people, is there a difference in terms of like patterns of movement, just eye movement, in different game types. And we found that this is the one in the right there is a first-person shooter. So you basically, with a first-person shooter, you're moving the camera around. So most people don't actually look around the environment. They look straight in the center. And with an action-adventure game where you actually need to move or look at different things and different objects, people tend to look a lot around. So the question is, so if they are expecting this kind of behavior, or maybe they are exhibiting these kinds of behaviors in the game that they play, would they do that in a different environment if we put them in a different environment? What are their eye patterns, and how does that, their previous experience impact their current experience? The third and last area is basically the analysis of game. Now that you have all this game data, what do you do with it? If you're collecting millions and millions of player data, or thousands of player data, or collecting over a long period of time, what are you going to be doing with that data? So we have been working on projects where we had a lot of data, and a lot of overtime longitudinal data as well. And we have been working on figuring out, well, what data is important to collect from a game? Do you want to collect everything? What's the standard set of data that you can collect from a game? Build a software for collecting that, and then what kind of machine learning techniques can you apply if you're really interested in individual differences, for example? What machine learning techniques can you apply to kind of look at individuals and strategies that maybe they do over time, or decisions that they make over time, but also conserve that when you're looking at between subjects as well. And then we looked at visualization techniques that allow different people, researchers, designers, developers, to also play around with the data. So it's more of an interactive visual analytics techniques. And all of that is actually published in the game analytics book that just came out as well. The point that I wanted to make was basically that games is great as a platform for doing science research, but there are a lot of different considerations to take into account. And you really need to think hard about how do you engineer that social connection within a virtual environment, and how does that get affected or implicated by the different people that come into these kinds of experiments. So just the takeaways again, and I'm just going to stop here, is the three things that you kind of have to focus when you're building a game for as a methodology for studying or specific phenomena. Technology aspect, thinking about the situation, how will you actually build that kind of situation given the technologies that we have? How do users, and thinking about the users specifically, that a lot of people play games now, play different kinds of games, and there are different kinds of gamers out there. What are these important aspects that you need to take away from their experience already with games that are out there? And also, what do you deal with the data when you collect it? And I'm going to stop there.